All right, I'm super hyped. Money Never Sleeps, episode 17. Great guests. Redbeard, Benny, RD, Eli, Curator's Dream. I'm super excited to have this group together. I'm going to jump right in with a question about a tweet you made yesterday, Eli. Is one-on-one
Sure.
one season back? And
Yeah.
Cole's amazing sale. What is everyone's view? My views on one-of-ones and their role in an artist ecosystem has changed. Number one, do people believe one-on-one season's back? And then what are your thoughts generally about one-of-ones in this environment versus, say, a collection like pianos or a larger collection or, players' editions, etc.? Who wants to jump in first?
I'll get it on. So
Get it on.
Number one, let's shout out Coldy the Legend. 2 sales yesterday.
Big sales.
Same counterparties. Bat Soup Yum to Nick Tomino and one confirmation. Decentralized 37 ETH and then 45 ETH for proof of work, which is Coldy's third ever super rare piece. So a pretty significant mint there. For me, this space moves on liquidity, right? I think that's no secret. I think it's more true than ever in a bear market. And I think the art side's still coming out of that. When it comes to one-of-ones, that's the place where liquidity can really suffer. And I think the role of one-of-ones in the future is it takes a long-term mindset. And as an artist evolves, I think XCopy is a great example. There are a number of one-of-ones that theoretically can build up, and that can create an environment that theoretically, again, is more beneficial and can have more liquidity in it. So again, I think XCopy is the strongest example of that. Had created for quite some time, had a number of one-of-ones. You saw the explosion of XCopy in 20 into 21. And I think they're incredibly significant, requires a more long-term time scale. And as artists pile up larger and larger amounts of one-of-ones, those that stay relevant, I think you're going to see some really, really interesting things happen.
Yeah. I'll jump in quickly here. I think it's interesting. There's this tension between someone like, let's take Coldy as this perfect example, right? Like he has I don't know exactly how many one-of-ones, but he's been such an OG. He's been in the space for so long that, he does accumulate this pretty significant number of one-of-ones. And what happens is ultimately some of those buyers from the early days want some liquidity and want to sell those one-of-ones like we just saw. That to me is most interesting through the dimension of an artist like Coldy or others who want to release more one-of-ones, but now need to contest with this secondary market for some of their prior one-of-ones. So I think, I was talking to this artist yesterday who has he's one of the top artists in our space in terms of notoriety and sales. He has under 20 one-of-ones. And then I was comparing that to another artist who's also in that tier, who has almost 100. And so, I think in terms of one-of-ones from the artist perspective, being so thoughtful about cadence and number, and like go explore collections, go do larger editions. But on the one-of-one side, I'm a huge fan of keeping things very small in terms of supply.
Benny, knock us out.
I don't know. What was the question?
Eli had made a tweet, one-on-one season is back. Do we think one-of-ones, thinking about an artist ecosystem, one-of-ones versus collections like Monument Game or Piano, like are one-of-ones the pinnacle of the ecosystem? Are they coming back, or or should artists look at it? You think collections or another approach is more important?
I mean, I think it just depends on the artist, right? Like some artists are better with collections, some are better with one-of-ones. I mean, I don't think one-of-one season ever left. It was just always here. It's just depending on what kind of collector or patron you want it to be. I think the problem is that we look at one-of-ones based off of things like XCopy. XCopy exploded, and then XCopy's numbers are an all-time low, actually, if you look at them, considering where they're selling at. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's actually a good thing because it'll probably bring new buyers in who are probably better collectors in some ways, to collect historical, pieces like which, I think XCopy is a great artist. Do I think he's the best artist? No, but do I think where he stands and represents in the time of the community and what he is, as that glitch artist and what And for us as a digital art community, I think it's no brainer, right? So like, I think that when you start seeing things happen with Xcopy again, it'll be a nice little like, oh, okay, maybe we're returning to that. Now, I hope it's not as, small group of people who did it last time. I hope it's a little different. It expands. I'm sure Xcopy would feel the same way. Like, the first time when Xcopy exploded, just like Beeple, and was like maybe a handful of people and two hands that really made all that happen. And it was just such a small niche market that you're able to inflate prices. Now, I mean, that's what the trad art world does also. So like, I don't think we're doing anything different than they are. I think we're just picking the better artists and better narratives. So like, to me, one of one season never really ended. It's just a matter of if you're a one of one artist or not. Like if you're somebody who feels that one of one art makes more sense to you, then that's what you should do. And if you somebody who you think that your supply could be larger, then I think you should do that also. I think that we have too many people who are telling people what to do in this community instead of people just doing what they probably should. And that's a big problem. And while I'm doing that, I want to read just a quote from Mark Wilson, you also known as Dyer with the Most Likes. In his book, Nevertheless, I rode. I had to know why. Years of senseless riding and gorging on structured pageantry had led me here, sitting numbly in a pre-warmed seat and finally considering the catalyst of our relationship. Why had it started? What had fueled its longevity? Was there an ending? And that's what I think about one of ones.
That's super dope. I love Ty's work. I love hearing all your perspectives on it. And I think from an artist perspective, absolutely like what's authentic to the artist they have to do. I do think for me, collections, maybe like with the launch of Piano and with Sam's Monument game, I do think that for many artists, they can take a great place in their ecosystem and be a great way to build a community. And I do think the impact of generative art and the sizes of editions in generative art has kind of drifted out where what used to seem like crazy big edition sizes isn't. I do feel that unfortunately, look, the beginning of the NFT and the big one-on-one bull market, I think was a time that we can't, like it was the start of an industry. And so I think looking at prices from then is not relevant. And the prices that are being paid now are big. I think what's the difference is that it is concentrated, just like contemporary art was concentrated in like 100 artists. The top 100 artists are getting a huge piece of the pie and growing. And I do think supporting emerging artists and figuring out more ways to support emerging artists is something that's important.
No, I agree. I think it's happening though. There's like some new collectors also that people don't realize. I think no matter what happens, the larger artists are going to be collected more than the emerging artists. But like even Xcopy, again, we're talking about him, or any artist really in our space at some point was an emerging artist. I mean, like,
of course,
people was making art forever and nobody noticed him until we had this community. So like he was an emerging artist. So was Xcopy for 10, 20 years, I believe, right? So like Sam as well, and Joe and whoever I think there's a lot of people who there's most of the bigger artists in our space, I believe, actually didn't just start making art now. I think that's more of an anomaly. Like I think Claire Silver always kind of made art, but maybe, maybe recently with AI, she started getting into it more while we were here. But I don't think that's usually I think the pattern was more like everybody here was kind of making art. So in some ways they were all emerging artists. And then, now they're established artists. So like, I think there's plenty of room for emerging artists in this community. The issue I think really is that what are you looking at? My dog. She wants to go outside. I was going to say the problem is that I think our prices were too high. I'm not saying that as a collector. I'm saying that as we got into this crazy hype cycle and everybody was pricing things. Look, I'm very happy I made some money. I was able to build this tunnel that I'm building right now. But overall, it was probably a mistake for us to price things as high as we did. I'm happy that artists made money, but I think what we created in the ecosystem was a feeling of an expectation of some certain things, and that coincided with a cycle in crypto that nobody fully understood, probably unless you were here, and then that was not a good mix. So I'm hoping now that we're going to have sort of a different market where people are going to realize that, and I think you do. I think if you look at some of the artists who've been here last cycle and are still here, they're realizing that, and they're trapping, they're putting their expectations in a different bucket a little bit, and I think that's really that I think is going to be important. And by the way, a lot of the collectors aren't either. A lot of the collectors aren't around anymore, or they ran out of money. So that's part of the problem.
I also think the first years in any industry, whether it was railroads, cars, Web 2, whatever, crazy mania happens, and the combination like NBA Top Shot, COVID, all that stuff. So I agree with you that that's not a time that can be replicated and shouldn't be thought about. Sorry, RD or Eli, were you going to say something?
No, I think that's one of the more fascinating aspects of what we have going on today. Where, Benny, what you said is absolutely true. So many of these artists, the majority of them have created for years and years and years prior to this, but then there's a commonality, right? Everyone gets introduced to this crazy market, right? And everyone has to learn sort of another set of lessons. So I feel like, all artists should be able to create obsessively. In fact, Alejandro Cartagena from Fellowship posted yesterday, and I was commenting back and forth with him. Artists should be able to create prolifically, obsessively, without constraints, without bounds, as a fact. Like, that's sort of one of the premises of being an artist. And yet we have this marketplace. And when it comes to minting, presenting, selling, I mean, there are some rules, and then there are some rules meant to be broken. I think we're all figuring that out real time in cyclical fashion.
But RD is a good example of putting out prolific art, but only selling a certain amount. So every great artist, I think, produces every day. And I think, as Benny said, like they were all their life, they sort of had to do it a bit, the best ones. And so I think that's another thing, that what you put out into the world versus what you sell in the structured ecosystem can be two separate things.
Yeah.
100%.
I want to go just quickly, Benny, back to your point about emerging artists. I think it's really challenging for an emerging artist in this space, because those who are collecting more or less have almost no patience and have an immediate expectation that when they buy something and support an emerging artist, that they can sell it relatively quickly for more. And that's just not how it works with an emerging artist. You have to have a really sustainable long-term view and be okay with that. And I just think there are so few patrons who are willing to think over multiple year time horizons that it's really hard, I think, for an emerging artist to find that network, develop that network. We've seen it, I don't know, maybe a couple times a year, someone like really nascent cracks through. But I've seen this commentary a lot on Twitter. It's more or less the same group of artists being supported by the same group of collectors.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, like, I hear you, but like, I don't know. I'm on Twitter a lot. I just like this new, like a new collector just popped up. I don't remember what his name is. And he's buying a lot of stuff quietly. I think, yes, what you're saying is correct about who was here before. Whoever's coming in now, I don't think they're buying to make money.
And I think anyone who's still here, like those people left a bit, and I think there's no market for that. But that's for sure. You're basically buying and using liquidity that you can't expect.
Yeah, so I think whoever's buying now is either buying because they want to buy the art and they care about it, or if it's a new collector, then I think that they feel the same way. I mean, look, you have to have some kind of monetization of the art. You can't just be like, hey, I'm buying and it's worthless. I mean, I hate when people are like, well, I'm here for the art. Like, okay,
you run out of money. No matter how much.
But there's partly, you want to profit off of it. I mean, that's every art, right? Like, you buy art for your house, you might hold it for 30, 50 years, but when you die, you're hoping that it has some value to it. So like that's the same thing here. So I think that I agree it's hard for emerging artists. I'm not saying it isn't. Like it clearly is. I mean, back in the day we had amazing people actually like Roger when he was doing, it still is, and highlighting a lot of those artists when he did those drops. I think that, Eli, you're doing that with Proof 100%. I think that there's still people like RD to the Moon. Is that his name? Whatever. I forgot his name on like Foundation. And I think Fellowship is doing a tremendous job with it. So I think that there's these opportunities, but I mean, I guess I'll say something a little controversial. Like, it's not, you got to work for your supper. So like, I hate to say it, but like artists want it easy, and it's not. And it was never easy to be an artist. It's easier now because of the technology and the social media and the things that we're bringing to the table that allow them access to people. But the idea that it's just easy to earn,
the artist is a thing. Look, I'm going to be honest. So the first 18 artists I dropped with my project were emerging artists. And then what happened as the market evolved is the challenge is you can't ask people to buy stuff that's illiquid. And the whole market's changed where there's liquidity and fewer artists. One of the things I think is super interesting is as institutions buy, liquidity becomes even more important. Like if you're an institution and you buy something like a Punk or ACK has a lot of liquidity in his ecosystem and so on, you can get in and out and you can buy it in bulk. And so I think there are trends that unfortunately support like the concentration of the best artists, and that's how history's been. But I do agree with Benny, like at the same time, in a country where costs of living are different, where somebody like 2 ETH can make their year, all of a sudden you are going to have way more artists like that. And I think just finding ways to like support and grow them. Look, all the people here, RD's newsletter is literally, I said to him, like, how the fuck do you do this thing, man? Every day. It is gone.
He wakes up at 4 a.m. He drinks 4 eggs. He works out.
Yeah.
And then rumor is that he has a pedicure every day. But after that thing, I don't understand. It's kind of superhuman, I think.
It's super fucking human. Oh, actually, and I will, like, one of the things that this group is, many of you, Eli, I met through summer. RD and I reached out just because of common interest. And Benny and I have gotten very close. And I look at the three of you and why I thought this would be good is the amount of support and love and like trying to lift artists up in the space between all you. And I hope, I'm in that same category, not near you guys, but the amount of work people do, like what RD does every day takes 3 hours, and he shares that with the community, and the community depends on it. Eli and what he did at Proof with like showcasing artists. The inspiration for this podcast was that part, or show was that, and the 104. Benny, I told him I watched him for 1.5 years, and I can't say enough good things about this guy and how straight, like, honestly, I want to be, he's a real example of how to support artists and be real about stuff. So,
okay, not really, but let me ask you this question because I don't really want to talk about that. But like, ask Eli and Roger, being that you both were and are have platforms that support artists. My question to you is like, how are we sorry, go away. How are you guys continuing to push those limits? Like, where do you see that future going? I'm very curious because, like, look, it's clear like OpenSea is just done or whatever. They have to pivot into something. I don't know. I do appreciate what Fellowship has done a lot, like I said, but I don't want to take away like from things like that you guys do, AOTM does. I think there's some aspect of this that like you guys, I guess, almost represent, I don't know about a gallery, but some new way of that. And I do think it's important for us to continue doing that. So I'm just curious to see where you guys go in that, because you're both really have two platforms that do that.
RD, go for it.
Yeah, Benny, I think it's the bear forces reevaluation of strategy and approach. And I think it gut checks us all. And I think the first gut check is, you really want to be here? Do you really want to keep doing the thing? And is this your mission, your path, right? And so gut check number one for me was obvious, right? I'm here and I plan on being here for quite some time. But gut check number two goes down to business model too. I think, Benny, it's an interesting thing you highlight. I'm very curious to see what Eli says. But from an Artifacts perspective, we had to look at that very honestly, right? I had to sort of sit down with myself and say, what makes sense right now? Mm-hmm. And the answer was to pause releases for a little bit of time. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, Artifacts is very tied into 3D modeling. And I felt like 3D modeling had a bit of a ways to go, where I think we can all remember the metaverse era of 2021, where, everyone thought we were going to be living in Ready Player One in 2 years. And that's just not the case. And so I think 3D still has a little way to go. And I very, very much believe in 3D models, and that they will have their moment, much like, Gen Art or AI, or, they'll have their meta moment. It's just not today. So that was number one. And then number two, just market realities. And so from an Artifacts perspective, I look at it as very much a brand that's alive and, not thriving at present moment, but a lot of plans to pick back up release pipeline. But ideally, I want to do it in less of a one-off fashion. I want it to make sense. I want it to be cohesive. And then ideally, when that pipeline gets back in place, you do the thing at the cadence that makes sense, but something that doesn't drop off.
Yeah, I love that, RD. On my side, we've done a number of these solo releases. We've worked with Helena Sarin and Summer and Otherworld, and those have felt like great opportunities to support their work, give them a platform, bring their work into physical spaces. But the reality is, that's not necessarily a sustainable business model for us as a gallery platform. That whatever role we play, that's not a great business, so to speak. So, I'm thinking increasingly about how we can have more durable relationships with artists like a Summer and Otherworld and others. How can we help tell their story that extends into the secondary market in a way where they and we have aligned incentives, because we're bringing a lot of value to the table in the way we're contextualizing maybe their entire body of work and the way we're presenting work across their collections that are available on secondary. So I think it's, I'm thinking more about things like Grails and these solo exhibitions as the way we bring artists into our ecosystem. And then how do we have a much longer tail experience with them, whether it is secondary or other forms of releases. But it's challenging as a gallery platform, whatever Proof is, to rely wholly on primary as that's our business, to RD's point. So thinking a lot about sort of more durable relationships, but in a way that is not just rolling over the traditional gallerist model. That's not interesting to me. That's not why I'm here. I think that's, artists are not here for that. So finding disruptive ways of having durable relationships that don't just roll over those traditional models that I think are kind of extractive is a challenge for sure, but something working on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, 452B OG does has a really good understanding of how a lot of that works together. And I feel like we have to find more ways to channel that. Like, for instance, your relationship with artists and the drops that you've done with the people that have your pass, everybody has raved about, right? But then the artists kind of stay in that community and have conversations with them, including yesterday, 2 days ago. I was very honest. I saw the Sense project on Ordinals, and first I was like, oh, this is dumb. And then I was in the room there, and it's the artist that you've brought in to do drops with 452B who stayed and had the conversations, ended up sort of like telling me more about it. And I was like, oh, wait. And then I saw the shine to it a little, and I kind of really fell in love with it very quickly. So I think that there's this interesting, way of how we can change all of those models. Yes, we need the connections and the gallery ish and the platforms that you guys are all building. But I do think you're all doing it very differently in that sense with that relationship. And, it just happened with 452B yesterday with this Sense project, but it definitely, you said that relationship. And when you build these relationships with artists, to me, that's what changes everything about what we're doing than everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, Benny, it's interesting because I watched Benny for a while, and that's to me the various ways I think like I love working with artists, and thank you for those kind words. Is I think like one of the big things I noticed in whatever Web3, I call it WebG, is people start a business and they have costs. When you have costs and you're burning money, it pressures you to do stuff. So I started with the premise, as crazy as it is. I'm like, I don't want any costs. I'm never pressured to do anything, so I can do what's right. Then, like Benny, my view, and as Grant said, you can't separate art and artists. Like getting to know artists and talking to them over many years has been like one of the greatest joys, in a way I think I can add, like support artists. Helping with how to structure ecosystems, it was mentioned earlier. Like as an artist, when you release your first piece, your second piece is half the supply. But years later in your career, you basically have no control over your supply, and your collectors do. So just like thinking through that, because most artists like have been focused on art and not thinking about that stuff. Then I do think everyone on this podcast not only like personally helps and advises artists because they love it, but publicly supports artists and promotes work and tries to do curation and highlight work that is different and should be noticed. And so I think that's a great way as a collector or a curator that you can bring a lot of value to the community and to artists, because this is, look, I guess curated foundation, and they're like, oh, find 5 artists under 1 ETH and under 8,000 Twitter followers. And it's hard to screen. There's 265,000 NFTs for sale on Foundation. So even somebody who wants to to find these emerging artists. So I do, people don't like to hear it, but I believe strongly in curation and strongly in building relationships to see, because this is a long-term relationship with a piece of art and a person who's going to be like determining the value of it through their actions. So
to sum it up, Mark Wilson, also known as Die with the Most Likes. I'm going to read you this paragraph from one of his books. I enjoyed shoveling more cash into the furnace as much as the next guy. I was better than whatever alternative there was. I guess we all had to buy ointment to heal the cuts from our routine daily floggings. That ointment would never actually heal anything. Smeared enough of it on, I guess it would seem like the cuts were never there at all.
Honestly, he's a genius. I honestly find him brilliant.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to turn it over. Who has something they want to talk about? RD, Eli? Okay. I have been miserable during shitcoin season. It impacted me. I have refused to do them. I'm no good at them. And then the only time I do them is when I'm like, okay, this one's working, which is of course the top. So it's also impacted me that everywhere I turn, no matter what, even the communities that were about art, grifter, whatever, all I see is fucking shitcoin chat. How have you guys been feeling? Do you think about this? Has it impacted you? Benny, you helped me a lot about how to think about it. But for me, I'm not going to lie. Most shit doesn't impact me. I don't care about prices. I don't care about ETH. But this shit kind of made me fucked up a bit too. Because I'm like, God, the kind of shit that people are doing, if the alphas misspelled company names and whatever fucking horse shit, I don't know. So it bummed me out a lot. It impacted me. And that's been something that's been weighing on me. I don't know. Am I crazy?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to get any easier. Sorry. So it just gets harder.
Apologize, yeah.
I mean, if
it hurts more, you mean? You're like,
well, I mean, this is just the nature of life in a bull market. If we're at the beginning of it, which I think we are, So like I think everybody needs to like hold on to their hats. I tweeted this yesterday. A bull market's like a dartboard. Essentially, you're going to make money unless you miss the dartboard, which is very highly unlikely, right? So if you throw 10 darts, maybe 1 or 2 will miss, but you'll hit the dartboard. Every once in a while, you'll close your eyes, or you'll throw with conviction and you'll hit the bullseye, right? And you'll make more money than the other darts that hit. So you're going to make money. Just the matter of question you want to do is, do you want to spend your mental capacity all day following this shit to either try to have conviction or throw with your eyes closed? Or do you want to just put some shit out there and be like, okay, it's going to go up. I need to sell. I need to take profit. I don't need to look at it every 20 seconds. I need to sleep on my phone. I need to sleep in my office. I need to not pay attention to my children. I don't need to have little things that go ding every time it goes up 10%. You know, like this is a bull market. Like I know this is going to sound crazy, but as crazy as it is now, I promise you this is not even close yet to what it was. It was in 2006, 15, 16, 17, when I think it was astronomically even crazier. I've seen some crazy stuff like Bohm and these pre-sales and things that definitely are new to me in that sense and I've been in crypto since pretty much the start. But like that feeling of like it's like I missed it. I'm an idiot. Why didn't someone tell me? I didn't sell. I should have sold. I made a mistake buying. All these feelings, like they're not gonna go away. The best answer. There's a great movie called War Games. You ever see it before? No.
Like way old movie.
Yeah. So
like with Project.
Yeah. So the computer is going to throw nuclear weapons at Russia. I don't know if you remember.
You want to play a game?
Well, you want to play a game, and then he tells him to play tic-tac-toe, and he realizes that he can't win. He says, well, what's the solution? The solution is not to play the game. And I can't tell you how true that is for shitcoin trading. The answer is really just probably, you could play, but you could just don't play the game, just kind of invest. And like, I could promise you that, I know this sounds crazy. Yes, you might not get the same multiples by trading some of these pre-sales, but if you put all your money into Ether, Sol, Doge, Bitcoin, you're going to make money in a bull market. I promise you.
Benny, I think that's one
people are great at it. Like Benny and OSF are insanely good at it. Sorry, go ahead and just do what they say. That's my strategy.
Now. Don't do anything I say. Don't, please.
I think there's a couple really key points to make here. One, I would say us all being on X, right? It still very much is the Twitter and X show. And I think a lot of people got into the digital art side of this in 2020 and 2021. And some of those people who got in 20 and 21 were not experiencing crypto at all. And so what they essentially were doing at that time is they were learning everything on the fly. But here's the thing, in 20 and 21, before PFPs, by the way, before the majority of PFPs, everything was small. Everything felt like a cozy little space where we could all just kind of like tell stories by the fire and everyone was doing well together. Here's what happens. It grows. Even during the bear, the whole totality of what this is and gaming tokens and utility tokens and PFP culture and this, it's all growing and it's all fracturing. And then now we hit this beginning, middle stages, whatever it is of another bull cycle, and it's madness. And so I think the first thing for me is that what, like Benny, I think you just said, you don't have to play. Right. You don't have to play. You don't have to be involved in gaming tokens. You don't have to be involved in PFPs. You don't have to be involved in art. You don't have to be involved in shitcoins. You get to pick your lane. But what makes it very difficult is we're all under the same social roof. And you look to your left and so-and-so is making $2 million on Bohm. And you look to your right and people are telling these stories. And FOMO's,
every group is talking about it.
Yeah. And the only way you can, again, Benny, to your point, the only way you can lose in a bull is to try to do too much when you don't know what you're doing. Like when you over trade, get involved in too much, try to handle everything all at once. What typically happens when you try to do that is you don't exit appropriately. You enter, but you don't exit, and you get wrecked on the backside. Right. So I think that's the only way you really do end up losing.
You basically, this is how people lose. It's and it's so fascinating because I swear this has been the same thing since I've been here since 2011. Okay. You end up out trading yourself. if I kept every Bitcoin I had and never traded, I would be like one of the richest people you know. Like I'm not saying because I'm not, trust me, but like I out traded myself.
Yeah.
I didn't need to do anything.
I used to do when I was
I just needed to keep the Bitcoin that I had and just I had conviction in it, and instead I was an idiot. So like that's it. You just have to like take your profit, put it away. I talk to K Dean about this a lot, like, and it's hard, but like what you do is you end up making money, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna take a little bit out. I'm just gonna make more money, and I'm gonna take a little bit more out, and then you're like, you're just out trading yourself, and then you're up, 2,000 SOL, and then you're like, wait, I'm only up 200 SOL. What happened? That's because your multiples you keep out trading yourself instead of just taking profit.
I used to do when I was a PM, I would take a snapshot of my portfolio at the end of the month, and then I would compare where I ended the next month versus had I done zero versus what I did. So I think the disciplined approach is like, exactly, Ben, you're totally right. If you want to be a nerd about it, which I'm a nerd, just like literally look at the comparison of where you would have been by doing nothing, and it'll show you. This was my lesson. I did this exactly, but I did 11,648 trades in 22 and lost a ton of money. And then last year, I hardly ever do any.
Well, this is live and recorded, right?
Yeah, this live.
Live. I haven't done any trades.
And recorded. Yeah, I've never done anything.
So like, if I did do a lot of trades,
yeah.
And I would tell you that, you can't be more and more right. Like I'm telling you, it's like if you do more than 1,000 trades, you're trading too much, right? Like it's all about, in my opinion, the conviction. If with art, it's conviction, and you have to have some faith and love, because like with art, I could have spent all the money that I've spent on art with Ian and Will and my fund and all that stuff. Like, yes, if I didn't spend it and I just kept it in Ether, I probably could have been a lot richer. My Ether would have been a lot more valuable. With that said, my conviction is the art is more important. Now, will it outweigh Ether 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road as long as I hold my art? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I do have conviction strictly, like, I do know this. I know that the banking system is changing. I know the world is changing. I know that blockchain is here to stay, especially with AI and things that we need it for. And I think that the next generation of children are going to use digital currency way differently than we are. So my conviction is that crypto is not going anywhere. So if I buy BOEM, and by the way, I like BOEM, just so you know, I own a lot of BOEM, or not a lot, but I own BOEM and I want it to go up. But I like BOEM. If you want to trade BOEM and trade it to Slurf, and you want to trade it to, DERF, and you want to trade it to like fucking whatever name they come up with tomorrow, like you can do that. But I'm telling you, 90% of the time, I don't care how good of a trader you are, you're going to lose your money. And like that's what it comes down to. You're just chipping away at that thing, and that's the thing you can't get caught up in, because what happens is like inevitably all you're doing is wallowing in this self-pity of like, I should have done better. And as a Jewish person, I already have guilt. I don't need more guilt.
You mentioned the word conviction. I think conviction is a beautiful thing. I want to route the conversation back to art for a moment and give you two examples of this. I was talking to quote unquote traditional art collector a little while back, and then more recently I want to use Bat Soup Yum as an example. But we talk about conviction and time scale. A lot of times in terms of supporting an artist or being convicted in an artist, a person may end up supporting that artist for the duration of a year or multiple years with no theoretical tangible benefit other than their conviction, their relationship, their belief. And then the traditional art collector that I was speaking to went on, and that artist exploded globally. And I mean, everybody had a great time. And then most recently, Bats involved in the Coldie ecosystem for quite some time through the duration of the bear. Bang, coming out the other side. Not that Bats is the most motivated seller, because he's obviously not, but everyone wins.
Agreed.
Bats still owns plenty of Coldie. One confirmation wins.
He lifted
Cold
the
is
space.
the king, and on we go.
I think that, to be fair, I think that Bat thought it said Goldie because he's so old, couldn't read it. And he got it. So he got kind of lucky. So I don't want to give too much credit. But given the fact that, like, you look at Goldie,
That's hilarious.
Goldie's like an OG artist in our space. There's very few artists that I have conversations with where I feel like, man, like he just loves what he's doing. It's so obvious. Like he feels so dedicated to the future of this. He's like, I'm not giving up. He has like this massive idea about this land he has where he wants to create this like art residence for people. And it takes amazing people, joking aside, Bat, who's a very good friend, who did look at Goldie and was like, nobody was buying his super rare pieces for years. And Bat's like, I know that he has his conviction. I didn't have that conviction yet. I have some Goldie pieces, but I want more. But he had that. And that's something that, like, as a patron and collector, I look up to. I can't agree more, Roger. Like, that's the perfect story of showing, like, where somebody like Bat looked, did his research, took his time, and someone like Goldie was patient in his time and had his conviction. They both had conviction. And when you both, an artist and collector, have conviction with each other, I don't care if the price is 40 Ether or 0.3 Ether. To me, it doesn't matter, because you're both doing something, in my opinion, that will eventually, and again, not 100%, but at least give you a little bit of a better leg up to be more successful.
What do you guys enjoy most about being in digital art?
Relationships. The artists. I would not be here if at the end of 2020, again, I'm very honest about this. I came in looking at NFTs only as a financial instrument, right? That's how I came in. I came in through the crypto pathway, through the crypto door, and found Nifty Gateway first, and then Super Rare and Maker's Place and all these other places. And very quickly, what changed for me, it was the art and then the artists. And that's really where the road begins and ends for me. If it wasn't for those fast friendships, those relationships, really everything that I do, if you track my business history since entering the space, everything I do, NFT Origin Stories, what is it? It's an artist interview platform. The Future of Art, it's an artist interview podcast. Artifacts, a collaborative brand with artists. 24 Hours of Art, it's a daily reporting mechanism to uplift digital art. Like, it's the artist for me.
Wait, can I show pictures here? Like, can I share my screen?
I think you can.
I want to show what Roger Dickerman did before. Let's actually
an option. They should be saying.
How do I? Okay.
Yeah, hit present at the bottom.
Yeah, hit present.
So Roger Dickerman, before he did, this is my dog. How do I share this? Oh, that's perfect. There you go. This is Roger. Can you see my thing?
Here, check it.
Yes.
Roger Dickerman was a personal trainer. Look at this guy here.
Love that shit.
Wow.
Look at this. He's helping others. He helped others back then and now.
Can we get that jumping photo, the bottom left?
Here, this
So
one.
Benny, I thought you were going shirtless. I thought you were going shirtless for a minute. I thought you were going to take that picture.
No. I mean, this is you shirtless. Look at this one.
Yeah.
That's not me. That's not me.
That's not
me. That's
not. Is this you?
No, that's
no.
Abel James.
Wait, this is you though.
That's me.
Yeah.
That's so sick.
Look at this guy.
but really, Benny, that's my fitness wellness career alongside my wife. That to me is community building, right? That really taught me that. Like I do really have all these dots in my life that it all came together here. That piece for me through and through was community. It was attempting to help people, right? Attempting to create something that's mutually beneficial in nature. And so that absolutely is carried. It's the whole, like, why do I want to have a 24 hours of art community? I could have just wrote the report and syndicated it, called it a day, right? Like, just write a report, syndicate it, and go. But to me, it was like, I thought there was something more. I thought there was something special, and that's the community piece of it.
Actually, that's when we started hanging. The minute I heard you did that, I was like, anything this motherfucker does related to art, I want to support, given his massive daily commitment to this space. Eli, what about you?
Yeah, it's the same thing, man. Like, getting to spend most of my time collaborating with artists and having real conversations and real relationships where we talk, yes, about their work and their career and a project, but also like health and food and family and foster real interpersonal relationships with incredible, creative, dynamic humans. The fact that my days are full of those conversations, I feel pretty damn fortunate. Now, the outcome of some of that ultimately is like a beautiful expression of that relationship in a project. But it's the day-to-day conversations, and then also like with folks like yourself, like, you know, Benny and I having a conversation where he's in the bath and I can hear the water swishing around. You know, I wouldn't trade that for the world.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's as RD said, man, it's the relationships that makes this all worthwhile, really. And, you know, it's kind of fascinating that most of this happens remotely. Like, I know all three of you. Oh, I've met RD and Benny in person, OG not yet, but like I feel connected to all three of you in a pretty deep way, and most of it's been online. So that's the big one, man, for sure.
Right? Go ahead, Brett. Go ahead, Benny.
What the question was, how did it get here? Or
No,
what?
because what do you like best about being?
Oh, I mean,
What's
yeah,
your-
I mean, you know, relationship. I'm wearing an all ships. You know,
Yeah,
I think the idea, you know, community with Dave Krugman and people like that have done is, you know, really made me connected. I mean, yeah, I mean, it probably for me, it's I have a very strong connection with a lot of the artists. I think I've tried to make that my big thing that I wanted to do here. You know, my wife has a master's in art history, and she, yeah, I bought a piece of art once, and I told her, I was like, I got to be friendly with the artist, and she said, "Oh, you're so lucky," because you know, back in the time, back in the day, even more recently, even like, but 80s, 90s, but even forever, historically, I should say. When you bought art from an artist, you never really met the artist. If you were lucky, you did, but to have a relationship with an artist almost never happened. So I just found that interesting, and I latched onto that. So I think that for sure is probably my favorite thing. That and I think that you know I get to live my life. I live a very chaotic, strange life, so I'm able to do all those things and this at the same time. It gives me access to be a little bit, you know, chaotic and still be able to do something that's constructive. So, like, you know, I think that obviously those are probably the two things that are most important to me. I don't know if that
yeah.
makes any sense. But
No, totally. I mean, for me, community and the relationships. DeBird's, this guy who was an alpha dog, used to say NFTs is new friend technology. And for me, like the people, I always tell people, like, yeah, we live digitally, but I'm telling you, come to these in real life things, and it changes your entire perspective. Like, I'm so excited for New York because whenever I'm feeling a little off and then I get around everybody, I'm like, I've never felt more hyped. So not only artists, which has been, there's a joy, and I know everybody provably on this show today has spent countless hours. I mean, Benny, I watched, you know, for years, and I saw how he did it, and you know, I approached it a similar way. You guys, like, I think, really just connecting with artists and being able to contribute to them being some part of the like by being able to communicate with them now. There's a certain joy that you are like there and part of the process. Like when OSF included my punk and PD5, it's just like I don't know, there's something indescribable about feeling like you're with your people
well,
and you're part of it and
yeah,
shit.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's something about being part of history, right? And that OG, like your punk is there in this piece of art forever.
Yeah.
You know, like I love that he included that. Like
Yeah.
I thought Ovi did such a tremendous job with PD5 of really like caring about and curating some of the best things in the space. So when I saw your punk, I was really excited about that and some other things that I saw. Like I bought a bunch of things. I just bought one that had your punk just because I wanted to have one that had your punk because I'm like, oh, I love OG. So like I think but that's the whole point of blockchain.
Yeah.
We're creating a society of things where we can actually put them in provenance unchained that cannot be taken away from us. I mean, how many times in history as a people have we ever been able to make a statement like that? Ever. And like, to me, it all starts with art and poetry and music. Those are the things that make those statements first. So the fact that we could live at this moment in time watching these people create these amazing historical things, yeah, some may be forgotten, but guess what? They can always be remembered because they're here. You know,
Yeah.
that's
Accessible.
yeah. Think about every artist. I see this all the time, but think about how many artists walked in and out of the doors between 1963 or 4 and 1970 at the factory, and we have no fucking clue who they are.
Yeah.
Right? We have no clue. There's no history of them. It's vanished. These are amazing creators who, by the way, helped build that career of that place and that artist, and they're gone. And now, and they're only their stories if we happen to find them to hear them. Right? But now we don't have to think like that. Now those emerging artists, every little part of it is there. I don't know. That to me is
I absolutely, totally agree. And I also think like one of the things I think about a lot lately is, a lot of people talk about digital art and then say, oh, trad art or focused on trad art. To me, it's come up on this, it came up earlier, but every younger person, I have kids, like everywhere they go, they're going to want to see digital content. And I think these artists who are doing, in a world where anyone can create aesthetically pleasing art, the greatest art will have such a huge power and impact. And like one thing I think is beautiful about art, music, and poetry is it's the language of the soul. And so I think my feelings when I'm dealing with art, like I went through life using my brain most of the time and sometimes emotions, and felt shitty a lot of the time. And so for me, one of the glorious things is like, I just had a talk yesterday with an artist, and he was showing their work. And I'm like, look, I don't mean to be rude, but there's no soul in here. And the artist specifically said, oh my God, thank you. I took out this religious element. I was worried it might impact people, and I didn't put my soul into it. And so you can't put words to soul. And so those moments of connecting with people in the space, people who are interested in the same stuff, or even in a more general way, like one of the beautiful promises when I first came into the space, I was like, wow, most of us have a name and like look a certain way, and you walk up to somebody and they assume a bunch of shit about you. And in this space, you can like be what you choose to be. You can pick the picture, and you can have these direct relationships with artists and people based on like what you do and who you are. And so I'd say the community and friendships, the connection with the soul, and then just the freedom and beauty, like we've heard, but of just this technology and the people it brings. So that's what brings me a ton of joy. We have like 7 minutes. You guys were supposed to do your homework and bring some
questions. Time's flying, OG. Time's flying.
I know, isn't it fun though? Like I find it's like just feels like hanging out, with people who are in this weird little crypto was fringe. Yeah,
Redbeard's getting the book out.
Dude, otherwise I'm putting it on you, Eli. You gotta step up, baby.
I got one.
I'm gonna let Eli go right after this. I'm gonna lead
us in.
I'm gonna lead you in. This again, Mark Wilson. This is Mark Wilson, also known as Die with the Most Likes. The book, by the way, it's called Sparsely Attended Funerals. In actuality, there were the ones being hunted and slaughtered. Their corpses sat in ergonomically correct desk chairs like taxidermied animals. Their limbs and their faces pushed and contorted into varying positions of contentment by the celebrities they follow and the products they desire to own. With that, Eli, I'll let you say what you want to say.
I want to say one thing before that. Die is the most brilliant. He can express love and just like horror with the same thing at the same time.
100%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what makes his work authentic. Like,
agreed.
He's like, this is terrible consumerism and snorting ground beef. but there's a love and connection, like about how this brings us together in a way. Anyway, hit us, Eli.
Yeah, I had to go get my hat.
And I like brown beard. I get
There you
didn't say it. Yeah, there you are. I should have said.
What are you guys doing with base, ordinals, Solana? Like, if an artist comes to you, are you taking the approach you mentioned earlier, Benny, which is if this feels authentic, explore it, drop something on Solana, or do you have pretty strong perspective on, well, like this kind of work is more well suited for base, maybe, or like maybe your work isn't well suited for ordinals? What are you saying in those conversations to artists?
So I've been getting a lot of those questions privately. I think it's a mix. Like I think Thank You X did a very good job of doing his research before he did his drop. And I think the second drop will be great also because of the way he understood the nuances of blockchain, of BTC chain, of the collectors there. I don't want to name names of other people, but sometimes I ask this question of every single person. If they say, okay, I want to drop on ordinals, I say, well, why not just do it on Ether? Like, if you don't have a good enough answer, then the answer is like, if your answer is like, well, I want to get the new crowd there. Okay, that's a fair answer, except that new crowd is smarter. The OMB people and what ZK Shark has done there, he's created some really intelligent collectors who are not just going to be fooled about, a money grab. They care about what goes on their chain. They care about what's being there. Look, I understand there's some people who are Ether maxis. I'm not going to name names. Snowfro. But otherwise, like, I think that artists should be able to create on multiple chains, and I think it should fit who they are essentially as an artist. Schiller's just did a great drop. And, to me, just a shout out to, both artists, but, who created both something on base and something on Arb. And I'm a big fan of Arbitrum and what they're building and the team. From gaming with Sobi to the artists that they're building over there. I got very close with some people there like AJ. He was going through artists to choose. And he chose, in my opinion, the best artist to put on Arbitrum. Right? Here's a perfect example. Danny, right? Creatures. To me, Danny is I always say this, out of all the artists, and I'm very close to a lot of artists, the most artist in this space is Danny, right? He makes money, he puts it back into making something crazy in art. I mean, he has like some weird cult going on, I think, or something, which I love. And it's great when I see the cult together. But Danny is like the perfect example. He's like, okay, I have my one-to-ones, but I don't mind making enormous supplies to get to a lot of people. And it works. It works really well in Arbitrum and what he was doing in his open edition. That's why I do like, and again, and that's why X copy is probably so unique in his way, because X copies one-to-ones have value, and then his open editions have tremendous value, right? Versus if Joe Pease did that, I think it would not work, right? So I think my personal thought is never fade anything in the space. That's when you lose out and you totally miss an opportunity. So like I think that the base, ARB, ordinals, any of the type of stuff, you always should seek out at least to understand it if it fits you. Look, my issue with Tezos is I'm very open about it. I feel that it was pushed too hard by certain people in this community and it had no substance to it. I don't think the Tezos community was great and the artists are great. I don't blame some of the people, not naming names, who pushed it and called it the future and all that. I think it was a play for them and it didn't work out. And I don't think they were totally honest. I don't think the Tezos people who run Tezos were really cared that much. So I think inevitably what happened with Tezos is that it was like a good idea. It just didn't work out the way I thought it would.
And the coin issuance was structured terrible, and they have no other.
There's like no.
Tezos mad because the art was great, but there's no use cases. It's
right. So like I but again, people still drop on Tezos, and I would buy there. I buy art in Tezos. I would buy art pretty much any chain that you give me. I don't really care. except maybe a couple I'm not going to name. But otherwise, like, I just think being multi-chain is a smart move sometimes for artists, but it really depends on the artist. Sam Spratt, in my opinion, wrote the best ordinal tweet. You should find it, because basically he's been asked a million times. He's like, and he explained why. He's like, look, it doesn't fit me right now. That doesn't mean it might not in the future, but like, you can't just decide that I'm going to drop on it because for no other reason. It's just not
1,000%. It has, look, the way I think about art is there's like the art, and then the medium itself is part of the art. Like for tattoos, some shit that looks good as a tattoo doesn't look cool, or some shit on your wall or a picture looks terrible as a tattoo. So I think the exact question, I've seen Benny ask this, and in fact, you were convinced after a discussion I saw. I do think it has to make sense and a reason why you're doing it. If you want to display if part of your art is like working, with something that naturally works with that chain, I would say my experience. So I agree 1,000%. My observations in practice are, I've actually when Ordinals came out, Benny, of course, was bullish and I came late, but I moved and I've had a wonderful experience. And the things I thought would be like negatives, like waiting on pending purchases and taking fucking forever. And so Bitcoin I've generally loved, and the artists that have dropped there, Thank You X to me is always 3 steps ahead. And a lot of artists, the high cost.
He really is, by the way, just a side note. Ryan is just
next level.
I'm just saying this to all artists. Study Ryan. Study Thank You X. The guy fucking hustles, and he's always 1 step ahead. He's so good at understanding that, and people want to hate on him for it, but they're not paying attention to the brilliance that he actually brings to it. Because yes, his art is amazing, but his technique on how to build that stuff is some of the best I've seen. Sorry.
Honestly, I did a raving tweet. He and I have spent a bunch of time together. I've been talking lately in Paris. Actually, Benny, when we were all hanging, the perfect example of somebody who exactly 2 steps ahead, and I don't like to get into projects, but Sense was a good example where I was like, why, what the fuck is this shit? And then I understood why it made sense on Bitcoin. I think generally I had been advising if you want low cost ETH, ain't great. We have to see which L2 develops. Obviously we need an L2, and there's, as you guys talked about, there's many. I think Base has huge support because of Coinbase, and that, to me, that's an enormous thing. I think you see these L2s putting a lot of money into artists. They've given big grants to wonderful people like Rug Radio, Transient Labs, and other supporters of artists. And Optimism, while the execution the community didn't feel psyched about, they wrote 3.4 million in checks or something to artists. So I think L2s are exciting. And if I was an artist, I'd try to get money basically and support.
I just think artists should. Sorry, I didn't cut you.
No. Just to quickly finish, Tezos, I agree. Sol in practice, I've done great trading Sol, but fucking terrible doing anything on Sol. So I'm literally just fucking. I traded
great. But there's some great exchange art, like what Keegan is doing there, and exchange art. They have great artists, man. I guess my point is I
had a show on it. They all came on the show, so there's great art there. I think it has a lot of great. I think there was a lot of benefits of speed and low cost that I wasn't appreciating, and I think the community there, starting with digital impressionism, but spreading into other areas. Finally, yeah. So that's what I'd say. And ETH, I'm focused on how L2s impact and would advise artists to do it. Benny, say what you were going to say.
I was just going to say, again, it's not easy to make money as an artist. So if there's a venue to make money that fits you, that you're not jeopardizing your future, then do it. Look, it's so easy for some larger collectors in this space to say, be careful about your supply. I get it. And I understand where they're coming from, but they're also coming from a specific scenario of collections that they probably have where it makes a difference. Versus a new emerging artist has to think differently. An ambitious artist, to me, is actually not somebody who's made it. Okay. I find and the most ambitious artists are the ones who are really trying to be so creative, ambitious from a smaller scale to get to a larger scale. I find more ambition there sometimes than some of the larger artists that are out there who have, larger teams already and stuff like that. The ones that are doing it, the Jesse Wilsons he's fucking sitting there at a computer all day by himself for 20 hours trying to create this. That to me is ambition. And to me, if there's other venues of doing this, by the way, they're outside of our chains, meaning like there's connections to be made to work with larger Web2 companies to create your art and make money. You should be doing those things. There should be nothing that hold anybody back to anything to say that this is the way to do it. And that to me is, I hope that's the message that artists understand, because it's just not easy.
Really.
My advice to artists is try to summarize to help you figure out and make consistent decisions rather than chasing a trend. If it works, 5 words that describe your art. For Pinder, I say like innovation, AI, robotics, on-chain, puzzles. So then you kind of get a sense of like, and then when you look at things, you have a framework to say, does this meet like how I define my work? And it makes life a lot easier. And then you're sending a consistent message, and you have to do what's authentic to you. And so I think the way I also always couch my advice with artists is like making a big mistake. You can work your whole life and make one huge mistake, and it can fuck up so much. So when I give artists advice, I'm like, don't listen to the advice unless it's helpful. Or if you ask me for it, don't listen unless it's helpful. And I'm generally biased towards avoiding big mistakes, whereas when I was younger, it was to getting big wins. Because my view is if you're a super talented artist, the wins will take care of themselves. It's just where you'll fuck yourself is a big mistake.
And you should listen to good people like definitely Roger, who's been here really from the beginning, and Eli, and some amazing people that are out there. So like, I think getting that message. If we're gonna leave, I just want to sum up I want to sum up our community again.
Wait, real quick, Benny. I want to double down on Jesse Wilson just to give another example in terms of the positive artists to potentially model if someone's a little lost. Siobhan Wong, someone I want to throw in. I think Siobhan is exceptional at pragmatism. I think Siobhan really understands at a deep level how much she has to push to get theoretically where she wants to get to. And she's willing to put in the work. She's willing to knock on the doors. She's willing to look silly at times, even though she doesn't really look silly ever, and put together real resources for collectors. That's the thing I want to highlight. I think what Siobhan does really well, I believe it's quarterly. She puts together a quarterly, essentially, milestones report for her collectors and for theoretical new collectors that gives people a very easy way to conceptualize her ecosystem. And to go back to something that's been said here, do you, right? Do you, if you have a clear why, go out there, experiment, be there, but to take the Siobhan piece of advice, but then be ready to explain it and wrap it up and hand it to somebody. Make it easy. All right, Benny, sorry about that.
Wait.
Oh, no, why don't
you have a beard?
What?
Huh?
Why don't you have a beard? Look at this beautiful.
I really blew it. I blew it.
Yeah, bro. You got a beard.
I'll get in the trenches.
Yeah. No beard.
I feel like it would be interesting what you would look like in a beard.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. And by the way, I'll wrap it up after, but hit us, Redbeard.
Okay. Mark Wilson, also known as Die with the Most Likes.
You gotta call him Die, bro.
I said also known, aka Die with the Most Likes. It says Mark Wilson. I'm just.
No, you're being, yes.
Sum up the community one more time. The neighbor took another long pause, perhaps waiting for the boy to react to his new luxury entertainment system and the courage it took to live outside of his means. Instead, the boy sat silent, wondering who would inherit the neighbor's debt once he finally passed. On that, I'm done.
I just want to thank you guys. I'm so happy we could get together. I love the amount each of you do for this community. I want to celebrate each of you, and I'm blessed to be your friend and blessed to learn from all of you. And I love being here today. If anyone has anything they want to say, go ahead. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
I want to say the same about you, OG. You give out a lot of compliments here. You are the architect of the show. You run an amazing community. The energy that you put out there, the thoughtfulness you put out there, again, all those compliments you're throwing out, I want to make sure to give you your flowers. So thank you for having us here, bringing us together, I think, in a really interesting show format. I like this format of bringing several voices on together, being casual. I literally brought a midday beer just for you, my friend, because that's the casual environment that you create. And I think magic comes from that type of a comfort level. So thank you, sir.
My pleasure. And look, I know all of us value you is I want to bring great people together who are inspiring and learn from them and celebrate their joys. And I think all of you make it easy to do that.
Yeah, I just want to say ditto to what Roger said, and really to all three of you. Like, look, you guys are incredible builders in this community, and I can't say this enough. We need less people talking about building and people who actually build, and the three of you are. So, like, I appreciate that a lot, because I think we have a lot of times people talk a lot about building and then they don't. So lately, it's feeling like there's better builders here, and the three of you are definitely three of those people. So I appreciate that. So OG, look, thank you. I did not want to come onto this show, but you let me read some of Dai's books, so that was the agreement.
Honestly, one of the highlights, I almost like his writing is so insane. Motherfucker.
I had other saved ones here, but I'll leave it on that one because that's my favorite one.
We can do a show with me, you, and Dai.
Yes.
Discuss. This was incredible, though. I want to thank you and love you, motherfuckers, and everything you do. And this was such a joy. And I really
appreciate you guys.
Can't appreciate you guys enough. All right, we out. Money Never Sleeps, episode 17. I got to start playing my rap again at some point. All right, word. Okay, that was awesome, dude.